playing the game and trying to stay in the same
Okay. Can you hear me? Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining in the social spheres of breaks. And last week we completely failed in landing a spot in the entertainment industry here in the neighborhood in Utrecht. And I'm a little bit afraid that it will be equally challenging. But let's try again and have a drink afterwards at Hofmann. Maybe we are having better luck today. Let's move to the next side of the cube, the hexagon we were discussing, and move to the squares 5 and 6. And the idea is that these two sides, so the actual work of your thesis, is informed by the blue theoretically oriented sides. So yes, the description is about the reality of technology and law. And it doesn't help to bother too much about whether that is a mechanistic reality or a formistic or organistic reality. But my suggestion and my claim is that the moment you start explaining, that is, the moment you start mobilizing literature that pretends to explain, that in categorizing those authors, it might be helpful to mobilize the blue theoretical planes, and that you say, this explanation is very formistic, or this one is very deontological. It can be an explanation in terms of knowledge, can be an explanation in terms of values. We will come to that. So that is the idea. Well, and then the main work is, on the basis of your research question, to collect data in the broad sense of the word, and then start explaining the data. And data is anything between a legal rule, a case, an opinion, an intention, a company, a technology, an algorithm, and so whatever you can describe. A development, unhappiness of consumers is data. Or the amount of people living in the European Union is data. Or the amount of people with a cell phone or a smartphone is data. And then many instructions on doing research deal with data and with all kinds of refinements in the definition of data. And one of those refinements we will discuss next week is between quantitative and qualitative data. And the idea is that quantitative data you can count. Sounds like quantity, amount. And that qualitative data cannot be counted. That's sort of the idea. When you Google, YouTube, how to do research, then you get those definitions. And next time, we will discuss that we have some difficulty in those terms. Because, according to those natural scholars, law is then sort of qualitative. But we think that we can count laws. And so we have a slightly different approach to those words, but we dare not to say out loud, because philosophy of science is much dictated by the natural sciences, physics, chemistry, biology. The people in the white coats in the laboratories, and those are the leaders of science, and we have sort of hesitation to say, well, your two terms, qualitative, quantitative, doesn't work for us. And so we force ourselves to adopt those terms. But I like autonomy, and I like hermeneutics of suspicion, which I apply tonight, and I say, why should we listen? Is there not an opening that we make up our own mind about those concepts? So this is a little seed in the in your brain, and then the explanation is a variation of logic. So any explanation means any argumentation is just a form of logic. And that means that your explanation is aligned along deduction or induction or abduction or hermeneutics of recovery or hermeneutics of suspicion. In other words, when you explain something, you mobilize logical basic steps. And in our field, that is quite often hidden. Because we have a tradition, so the literature, legal literature you study for the main courses, is not always making small steps. And taking many things for granted in terms of the goals of law, like peace or good functioning internal market. And then we mobilize those big concepts to explain certain things in law or in case law, etc., etc. So explanation is something we will return to. And then the mechanism of description and explanation is judged in terms of quality along three sort of lines. The first line, the first keyword is replicability. So the idea is that the activities you are doing can be replicated, meaning redone, copied by someone else. And that means that in your description and in your explanation and in your forecast, you have to be very transparent. You have to indicate where did you find the data and who is the author of certain explanatory literature you use in your own explanation. So the fiction is that all of your LLM theses can be redone by the next generation of students. So the whole story about footnotes and transparency and bibliography, etc., has just has multiple reasons, and the first reason is the replicability. And that is why we are neutral in terms of style, in terms of names, years, italics, yes, no, these types of things, because it doesn't matter as long as human beings can understand where to find the data and explanation. The second criteria is reliability. And reliability has to do with the premise, with the rule in deduction, induction, and abduction. Is the type of assumption reliable? Example, there are footsteps in the sand of the beach of Scheveningen. And the print of the footsteps resemble huge boots. You know those Dutch plastic boots? Dutch laarzen. And that is the evidence you see. Prints in the sand of the beach. And then you develop a hypothesis. And the hypothesis is reliable, most likely a human being have passed this path, and that human being was wearing the boots, and that is why we see the print in the sand. And that is a reliable premise, a reliable rule, because humans wear boots, and boots leave a print, a hole in the sand. A non-reliable premise or rule is the hypothesis that you say there was a cow, and the cow was wearing the boots and was running across the beach. And why do we label that a non-reliable premise or rule? Because none of you ever saw a cow wearing boots and then just 2 feet. And that is the distinction between reliable and non-reliable premises in your reasoning. And the fascinating thing, ladies and gentlemen, is that on the earth, intellectual people are quite capable for complex things like society, law, and technology to come up with cow-wearing boot theories in their explanation. So in the course of the year, I will once in a while remind you and say things like, beware of the cow theories in your own thesis. And the technical word is reliability. And then validity is the overall judgment of your outcome. Validity is the sum of replicable data collection and using reliable premises and combining that to a valid outcome. So that is sort of the last sort of category. And in the argumentation category of the assessment form, these are the 3 words that are actually in the form, partly, but especially in the head of your supervisor, looking at the various aspects of your thesis. Reliable, replicable, reliable, and validity. And I prefer this order. I invite you to go on YouTube, and then you see all kinds of stories that start with validity and then do replicability and then end up with reliability. But that is a non-logical order. Because the order is first data, laboratory, which you should be able to replicate. Nothing happens yet. So that's the first category. And then reliability is the qualification of your reasoning, which is halfway description and forecast. And validity is the logical endpoint of your whole reasoning. So this is the most important sort of square of the cube, with connected questions we will discuss in 2 times, like where do you find your data? Official answer, Utrecht Library. Unofficial answer, Google. The question is, what will you describe? What will you explain? And what is your explicit or implicit prediction about law and technology in our societies? So that is what it has to do with you. And then the outcome. Outcome leads quite often to confusion, and that directly relates to the amount of chapters you write. And there are 2 flavors. One flavor is that you write an explanation and advices and recommendations, and that outcome is in the conclusion, in the concluding chapter. And the other flavor is that there is a separate chapter on your answers of the research question, and then you have a concluding chapter in which you summarize and make some recommendation. We will come back to this. for now, the important thing is to accept that you have description and explanation, and that you have as an umbrella research question and the research outcome. So what I claim is that the explanation is not your outcome. It's just a tool towards a outcome of your research project. Which means that the outcome ultimately depends on your research question. So if the question is, what can the market be advised to do in terms of Facebook privacy? Then your outcome is an advice. If the research question is, what is the explanation of the unhappiness of consumers in Europe? Then it ends in the explanation. If the research question is, what clauses in the current law can be changed? Then the outcome is an advice on change of the text of legal clauses, law clauses, statutory clauses, etc. So be aware of the difference between the steps of what research is about and the steps that are caused by yourself, because you're the author and the boss of the research question. And quite a lot of energy in the relationship supervisor and student is about this theme. That the debate is, okay, but what is your research question and how is what you wrote an answer to that question? So things I say to my students is, when they hand in a draft, then I ask, is this an answer to your question? Physically they hand it in, I ask the question and say, okay, let me check. And then students go home and look at the concept of outcome. Is it a sort of logical connection between the research question and the outcome? And again, according to my taxonomy, there are 3 flavors of such an outcome. So either implicitly or explicitly you say, cope with it. And so if there is no advice, then the forecast is your last item in your thesis. Then you predict tomorrow the law on privacy will be the same as today. Goodbye. That is implicitly the advice, cope with it. Which is an outcome. And my prediction is that most of you will find a few things that could be changed, and that's then perceived by you as the main outcome. There's some literature in the list where those words like ontology, epistemology, logic is discussed in a similar way, almost similar. Not all the categories are introduced by most of them. And this slide has the purpose of directing and suggesting you to take some interest in the topic and do some research of your own, building on various earlier courses you had on philosophy of science or research or whatever you had in the past. Also, to align that earlier knowledge. So I know that a few of you had some courses in this respect, and you had multiple supervisors for multiple writing experiences, and I invite you to put that on your desk. So my slides, those experiences, and see, okay, where are the overlaps and where are conflicts or misunderstandings or confusion, which then could be discussed or this literature in future sessions or in the tutorials in December and January. So these are all ingredients for these things. Allow me to go back to Aristotle for a while. There's no slide on that. And that is that Aristotle developed an idea of explanation consisting of 4 types of explanation. So we are all used in the mechanistic worldview that everything is caused by something. We are used to the concept of causation in terms of billiard balls. So there's a billiard ball and rolls and hits the other ball, and then as a consequence the second ball starts rolling. So that is our main interpretation of causation. And the funny thing is that in philosophy there was originally a multiple approach to causation. And Aristotle developed the 4-fold approach, also known as the 4 causes. And they are the formal cause, the material cause, the efficient cause, and the final cause. And he has examples, very concrete examples, like the table. And you can explain a table in a material cause approach, that you say, we see what we see because it is wood. So the substance in terms of the atoms. And you can explain the same, so we talk about explanations. Let's go to the reasoning and explanations. The same table you can explain with the formal cause, which is the design. So this table can be explained because it's the result of someone who designed it with those 4 corners and this side and the machinery in it. And then the efficient cause is the one we are used to. That is the normal causation in the modern sense. And that is, this table can be explained because someone built it. So there was a plant or a carpenter of the university, and that person actually created this table. And that's the explanation that we see a table. And then the final cause is a type of explanation where you say, doesn't matter that it is wood, that it is designed, that it is made by someone, like a billiard ball, but the final cause is that it is a useful tool to put our stuff on. So the telos, the goal of the table. And what I ask you is to realize that officially in natural science and science in general, we abolished all those fancy types of causation / explanations, and we dream of this one explanation of the naturalistic, the efficient cause being the billiard ball explanation of things. And I ask your attention for the fact that in law we are not quite often explaining things because of the billiard ball. We quite often explain things for the ultimate goal, the final cause. We say law is there for justice or for certainty for the contract parties, and so we have a very Aristotelian view of the functionality of our subject. Because we are not explaining European law in terms of, well, there's a European Parliament and a Commission, and according to that and that article of the treaty, they're allowed to make laws. Yes, in your bachelor, in the first week, that's one of the exam questions. How are these things created? But that is not in a master the most exciting type of explanation. So we look quite often in our industry towards those purposes. Purpose of law. I will teach together with Jan Gerards and some others the course Rule of Law. That is almost 90% about the goal of rule of law in the legal system. So that is Aristotelian final cause. Also, we talk about the design of the law. We have designs like constitutions. We have design concepts like hierarchy, that member states' law should not infringe on European law and topics like that. That is a design thingy. So, again, an example of where the official doctrine of doing research, which is 99% designed for people in laboratories, so all the YouTube courses and manuals are designed for that, are just not adopted in our industry. But we failed to make books on what I'm telling you. I'm working on one, but there are not that many books that say, hey, listen, maybe we should reconsider Aristotle in those other ways of explaining. Why? Because we are doing that for the last 2,000 years. And the good news is that that same position of Aristotle is adopted by contemporary philosophers. So we don't need to refer to the old guy. We can say there's a brilliant Harvard professor who says that the goal of the table is, in terms of law, the thing we should look at in terms of explanations of what we see. So my whole story tonight is a plea for wrong direction, don't get dizzy, is a plea to study the literature on how to do research and how to write, but not to take it too literal. Because in our industry, the legal industry, we sort of do not adopt those principles. We have our own world, and we are hesitant to give that names, because then we have to say out loud that we are not just looking at billiard ball type of explanations, but also other types of explanations. And that is not necessarily in the science community a cool thing to say. Because the problem, ladies and gentlemen, with formism, with teleological explanations, is that it's not so easy to determine what the goal is. And that is sort of a weak point of our industry, that we are traders in goals, where the whole concept of goal is tricky. Because quite often, the goal was determined by male human beings claiming that a divine whispered in their ear what the goal was. That's sort of 90% of our law. And we are sort of in a transition period, maybe, in trying to rephrase that, but we are not that far. And then I'm not talking about the Netherlands especially, but more the law in other countries on the globe. Just as a reminder, in the Constitution, the unwritten Constitution of the United Kingdom, Queen Elizabeth is the head of the Anglican Church, which is the state church of the United Kingdom. So we quite often talk about divine law in terms of other countries, but our friends across the channel are, in terms of the Constitution, exactly the same designed as Iran, in terms of the role of separation between church and state. And the Netherlands has all kinds of rules on not working on Sunday, etc., which is basically also a divine command type of definition of the goal of law. So a plea to recognize that as a discipline we are involved in all kinds of activities, types of explanations, phenomena, where the hardcore colleagues of the Uithof in the natural science claimed to have abolished it. So that is a mortgage on our research, and that is one of the reasons that next time when we discuss legal scholarship, we will disclose and explain and describe the struggle in the law literature about doing research. An important topic next time is the project plan approach to doing research. So if you wish, you can Google project plan and project management, and it's very easy, you can get a degree in it, but the bottom line is that you make a plan, that you get it approved end of January, that you execute it in Q4, and that it is assessed. And so that is one approach, a very concrete approach of what you have to do, and we will discuss. And then the two major topics between now and the end of January are research question and research topic. Out of order, research topic and research question. I do believe that it's very late and that in the December tutorials, when you have digested this information and other information, so that a dialogue can occur in those tutorials. For today, I thank you for your attention and see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.